שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך.
Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. We have a very interesting study for you ahead. We're going to be continuing in the book of Zechariah, the book of Zechariah. We're going to be continuing in Leviticus chapter 25, and we're almost at the end of the book of Leviticus, after which, of course, we'll start the book of Numbers. So we've got a lot going on, and we're going to do a little bit of biblical archaeology to start off. But let me start with a little bit of news. So this has been a very interesting week. Without getting into details, Karaism and the ideas that I present have become a bit of a controversy here in the small city that I live in the Golan Heights. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of, shall we say, what would be the right word for this? A lot of buzz, some good, some supportive, and some attacking. In other words, without getting into great details, the word is definitely out, and this is not, was not necessarily my intention. I'm just here to do my thing, and I kind of tell people what I believe when and if they ask. But apparently, this has put a bee in certain people's bonnets here in the local city and maybe beyond. I don't even know. There are a lot of discussions going on. There are a lot of meetings being held. People are scrutinizing what I have said in the past, what articles I've written in the past, and stuff like that. So my thought that comes to mind when I think about all of this is just how brainwashed people are. It really is an insight into what's going on in the nation of Israel. People are so brainwashed, and really, all of the opposition has come from the religion. And by the way, before I say opposition, I should say there are many, many, many people who support me, who have told me either outright or who have implied it, who have kind of hinted at it, or have kind of said, listen, I really support what you're saying, but I can't come out publicly and say it. So there are a lot of supporters of the things that I have to say, of the work that I'm doing, if you want to call it that. And there are certainly some detractors because it threatens the power structure. It threatens the 2,000-year-old power structure of the rabbis, of the Pharisees, which absolutely must be collapsed before Israel can reach its true destination. And when I say Israel, I mean the nation of Israel, the state of Israel, however you want to look at it. And it's so, I would say shocking, but I shouldn't be shocked anymore, right? Because this, as I always say to people, this ain't my first rodeo. I've been doing this for close to 30 years now. And promoting Karaism, identifying as a Karaite, getting out there and saying my truth. And so I shouldn't be shocked anymore. But I guess I'm lulled into being shocked because all I'm doing is just going out there and saying what I think is the simple truth, that anyone with two eyes and two ears and half a straightforward brain in their head can perceive and can understand. In fact, I'm just getting a little air in here. In fact, when I speak to people, I always say to them, don't believe me. You don't have to believe a word I say. Just go read the Tanakh. Just go pick up the Tanakh and read it. And so it has nothing to do with what I'm saying. Go read the Tanakh without any of the commentaries, without any of the rabbinical interpretations, because that's exactly what the rabbis don't want. They don't want people to read the Tanakh. They don't want people to hear the direct message of Yahweh and of the prophets of Yahweh and of the great philosophers of ancient Israel. They don't want the people of Israel to hear that message, because if the people of Israel hear that message, they're going to realize what a bunch of charlatans and what a bunch of scoundrels and what a bunch of liars and what a bunch of usurpers the Pharisees slash rabbis are. So as I always say, and as I've said for many years, the hardest book to find in any rabbinical synagogue is what? That's right, it's a Tanakh. You can find all kinds of different books, some completely irrelevant, some just full of absolute garbage, absolute nonsense, full of paganism, full of God knows what. Go try and find a Tanakh in a rabbinical synagogue, and you'll be hard pressed to do it. You're going to have to look on. You might find it, as a friend of mine says, you might find it stuffed away in a corner in one of the lower shelves. You might find it, one or two copies between a whole bunch of other books. You might not find it at all, as a matter of fact, because the rabbis do not want the people of Israel to hear the direct message of the prophets, the direct message of Yahweh to the people of Israel. They're scared of that message because they know that once the people of Israel pick up on that message, once the people of Israel understand what the Torah, what the Tanakh, what the prophets, what the great people of ancient Israel, the great ones of ancient Israel were and still are saying to the people of Israel, then they know their party is over. Their party is over. The party is over. Their power is gone. The game is over. They're going to be exposed as the crooks and the criminals and the charlatans and the usurpers and the deniers of true Torah that they are, and they always have been for 2,000 years. Now, does that mean that every little rabbi and every little synagogue across Israel and across the world is a criminal, a usurper, and so on and so forth? No, these are just, most of them are just honestly just simple people who don't know any better. They were just indoctrinated into this way of thinking, some from an earlier age, some found it at a later age, but for whatever reason, they were indoctrinated into it. But there is a certain commonality between, I would say, many of the people who stick to rabbinical Judaism. And part of it is, I guess it falls into a different category. Some of it is just being brainwashed, is just not being able to think outside the box, of being indoctrinated into a system which uses, at a very early stage, once you get into it, a system of rewards and punishments, of threats and rewards. You're threatened with all kinds of things if you buck the system, as you would be with any other system. You're threatened with isolation, with ostracization, with perhaps threats to your business, or people won't do business with you, and so on and so forth. And you're threatened with more spiritual, quote unquote, threats or punishments as well, that you're not going to achieve the afterlife, that you're going to be cut off from Israel, that you're going to be punished by Yahweh, by God. They don't even call him Yahweh, by Hashem, and so on and so forth. So a lot of people are indoctrinated into that, and they're busy with their own lives. They have their jobs, they have their families, they have their lives to live, and they just don't want to think beyond that, and that's fine. I don't blame such people at all. They're just living their lives, just as, say, in the United States of America, someone's just living their lives, doesn't want to think too much about, is the government corrupt? Was Corona a hoax or not a hoax? And so on and so forth. But then there's another class of people, maybe more among the leadership, who they're just, there's an arrogance, there's a blindness due to the honor and the power, the local power within the synagogue, within the congregation, the honor that's given to them, because these are people, a lot of them, that they need that. They don't have enough self-confidence. They don't have enough internal sense of who they are. They don't have enough of a belief in their own self-worth. So they need to receive a sense of worth from externally, from others. Like in any other society, why do people become I don't know, co-work on Wall Street to become, vice presidents of some bank on Wall Street in the United States. It's not only about the money, it's about the honor, it's about the prestige, it's about the position in society, because these are people and they don't care what they have to do to get to that position. They don't care how many people they have to screw over, how many little old ladies they have to, um, steal money from uh, in order to get to their position. All they care about is their own self-aggrandizement, because these are people who don't have an internal self of who they are and who they're not. So that is another class. And then you get to an even higher class of people, let's say the leaders among the Pharisaic, among the rabbinical community, and they're the ones who I think are kind of know what they're doing. They know that this is something that that is almost I think I'll just put it in simple terms. I think there's a bit of evil that's going on there for them to continue in the ways of teaching this false form of Torah, this rabbinical Judaism, this Pharisaic Judaism to the people. So I think there's a deliberate attempt to do evil and to hurt the nation, and they'll pretend that they are the saviors of the nation. They'll pretend that they are the ones who are showing the people the right way to go, but in fact they're deliberately continuing this 2,000 year old lie that got the people of Israel, that got the nation of Israel into the mess it's in the first place. So I watch all these people float in front of me like I'm watching cartoon characters. I just sit and I listen and I pay attention. I try to see where each one is coming from, what's motivating them to stay in this cult, what's motivating them to promote this cult, what's motivating them to believe in this cult. And again, it falls into all of these various categories. It could be anything from just not thinking, because just following the masses, as you would see in many societies and many cultures and many groups, through a sense or through a results of arrogance and the need for honor, the need for external validation of one's own position in society, one's own self-worth, all the way up to those who are really, the masterminds continuing the lie, just like might be equivalent to, let's say, the upper echelon of the Catholic Church, who are continuing their almost 2,000 year old lie within the societies where they have some kind of influence or some kind of control. So that is what's going on, and for me, so I guess getting back to the original point is it's just sometimes shocking to me that I would even have opposition, because what I'm saying is things that are so simple, so straightforward, and not even dependent on myself. As I say, just go read the Tanakh, go read the Torah, go learn biblical Hebrew, go understand what the Torah is saying, go look at the sources that there are many historical, archaeological, and scriptural sources that show how in ancient Israel, before the Pharisees rose to power in the mid-Second Temple period, how the people of Israel understood and kept the Torah. Go look at it. Don't take my word for anything. Search well in the scriptures and do not rely on my opinion, as one of the most famous Karaite slogans says. So it's amazing. I shouldn't be amazed anymore, but I guess in my innocence, in my own naivete, and in my own lack of realization of just how much craziness and even evil there is still in this world, I sometimes get shocked when I run into roadblocks. But I shouldn't be shocked at all, because this is the way the world is. I had a friend of mine in the community here actually tell me, he said to me, Melech, I basically know that you're right. I agree that what you're saying is correct. But You can't make this stuff up. But he said, I know that rabbinical Judaism is irrational. Doesn't make any sense. But he said that, but also the world is irrational. So it's only rational to keep an irrational form of Torah in an irrational world. Okay? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. At any rate, I just have to, as I always have, just double down and push forward with what I believe in and get the word out to those who are interested in hearing it and say my truth. And wherever it's meant to go, it will go. And are the Orthodox shunning you socially? Again, it's a very mixed kind of thing, because this is a very, where I live in the city in the Golan Heights, it's not a regular place. There are a lot of people who are very, shall we say, independent thinkers in a certain way. These are people many people who are here, especially in the English-speaking community, are people who really didn't get along in standard society. So I actually have many supporters, many people who support what I have to say, who agree with what I have to say, or who are at least open and interested in what I have to say. And then there are some who are not. So no, I wouldn't say as a whole they're shunning me socially. There are certain sub-elements who are doing so and are maybe trying to affect or trying to convince others to do the same. But I'm not reliant on them to be 100%. I'm not reliant on these people for anything. I'm not reliant on them socially. I have enough friends already in the city here. I'm not reliant on them to make a living monetarily. I have other sources of income, including the many generous donations that you guys give me to continue doing the work of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And quite frankly, I'm certainly not reliant on them for anything such as honor or recognition or anything along those lines, because that's not something I care about. In fact, I shun it. I try to avoid it as much as possible. Although attention seems to follow me, even though I want nothing to do with it. That's just the fate of, I guess, what the message that I have to say. A lot of times the prophets would say that and I'm not saying I'm a prophet in any way, shape, and form. I'm just saying the prophets of old would call their message a burden, a masah, this heavy load that they have to unload on the people, and they know the consequences to themselves of what they have to say. They were just saying, it's very similar, right? They were just saying straightforward messages. And the people were so corrupted in their own hearts and in their own minds, and so brainwashed by the corrupt leadership, that a simple message such as do good and avoid evil, don't worship idols, worship only Yahweh, the God of Israel, and don't hurt the widow, the orphan, and so on, were considered radical messages. Were considered threats to the ruling corrupt establishment. So that's the world we have to deal with, unfortunately. And that's part of the game. But the game goes on, and not only does the game go on, if they come and attack us, we only get stronger. We only double down, and because Yahweh, Elohei Israel, Yahweh, the God of Israel, is with us. So definitely, please pray for our mission. Please pray for what we're doing here at the World Alliance of Qara'im. Your prayers are definitely helpful. If you want to come visit here in Israel and visit the community, that is definitely worthwhile and definitely helpful. Your monetary contributions are definitely worthwhile and helpful. All of these things help, and together we will get the word out, and we will save these people from themselves, because the only ones they're hurting by clinging to this 2,000-year-old distorted form of Judaism, this 2,000-year-old lie, is themselves. They're preventing the nation of Israel from reaching its true destination, from reaching its true destiny, from allowing Yahweh to come back and make his presence known once again to his people, to the people of Israel, and to the entire world. So that's all I have to say. And I thank you guys for all of your support that you've always given me. Some of you have been here with me for years and decades even, and I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And we will keep on going and see where things go. It's getting interesting. That's 100% for sure. But Yahweh is with us. and he will show us the correct way, and he will protect those who are loyal to him, and he will destroy those who come against him and his friends, or those who are loyal to him. Okay, enough about that. Anybody want to say anything? Any questions, any comments before we dig into actual material here? If not, then let's get going here. The first thing we're going to talk about is, whoa, what's going on here? Are we on the right internet? Yes, we are. We're going to do a little bit of biblical archaeology. I think biblical archaeology is extremely important to know as a Karaite, as a Choser b'Tanach, as a Tanach-only person, because there's a lot of evidence, for the truth, or let me put it in a different way. There's a lot of evidence that backs up statements and historical, or the stories in the Tanakh, number one. And number two, there's a lot of evidence that shows exactly how the nation of Israel understood and kept the Torah in ancient times. And when I say ancient times, I mean back in First Temple periods, in the First Temple period up into, including really, I guess, through the end of the Persian period. So a lot of the troubles seem to start happening in the Hellenistic period. I was watching a very interesting lecture this week, and this guy, very knowledgeable. I'm not sure I agree with everything he says, a professor. And he essentially says that Judaism, he was talking about the rise of Judaism. And what he means by Judaism essentially is, he really means rabbinical Judaism, Pharisaic/rabbinical Judaism. And he says it really came with the rise of Hellenism, which he dates essentially to the middle Second Temple period, I guess you could call it, to around the time of the Hanukkah story, a little bit before the time of the Hanukkah story. So at around 170 BCE, so the Greeks ruled over Israel from 332 BCE through 63 BCE. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great conquered Jerusalem, conquered the land of Israel, and took over Israel from the Persians, completely decimated the Persians. That was essentially the end of the Achaemenid Persian Empire at that point. And so from 332 BCE until around 170 BCE, Israel was ruled by one group of Greeks, originally by Alexander the Great, but he died soon afterwards at a very young age. And then the Ptolemies, the Greeks, so his empire was split among three generals, and one of the generals was based in Egypt. Those were called his name was Ptolemy, and so that was called the Ptolemaic Greeks, and they ruled over Israel until approximately 170 BCE, when another one of the sub-kingdoms of Alexander the Great, called the Seleucids, based on the original general who took over that area from Alexander, named Seleucus. So the Seleucid Greeks then took over from the Ptolemaic Greeks in around 170 BCE. And there was a certain king named Antiochus Epiphanes IV, who became king at that time, and began, at that point, it's believed, began the active Hellenization, or Hellenism became extremely popular in Israel. And that is, the rabbis had already started to rise to power. The Pharisees already started to rise to power at that point. But essentially, according to this particular professor, the Pharisees then incorporated a lot of Hellenistic ideas into their new form of Judaism, and this is what became the predominant form of Judaism. This is the type of Judaism that we're keeping, that I'm not keeping, that you are not keeping, but that many Jews, that Israel keeps to this day, to one degree or another. This is rabbinical Judaism. It's heavily influenced by Hellenism, by Greek Hellenism. It's heavily influenced later by Roman culture. The Romans took over the land of Israel in 63 BCE at the behest of the Pharisees. The Pharisees invited them in to essentially squash their enemies, who were the Hasmoneans and the Sadducees. And so this is the Judaism we have. It's a Hellenistic Romanized form of Torah. It's a derivative religion of Torah. It's not Torah. It's Hellenistic. It's a Hellenistic Roman / Zoroastrian derivative of true Torah that the nation before this time had never heard of. And I'll just end. This is getting too detailed and too complicated, but I'll just end with one thing. Whenever you speak to rabbinical Jews and you ask them why they keep rabbinical Judaism or what their proof is that rabbinical Judaism is truth, they'll always say the same thing. They'll always say, this is the way our ancestors have been keeping it for blank years. And I'll fill in the blank in a second. They always use the same number again and again and again. Anybody know what that number is? This is the way our ancestors have been keeping Judaism for how many years? They always say the same number. And that number is always 2,000 years. They always say, this is the way we've been doing it for 2,000 years. Yes, that is true for 2,000 years. And I always respond, yes, 2,000 years, but not 3,000 years. There's a blind spot that the Jews do not realize that 2,000 years ago, if you go back 2,000 years ago, where were we? We're in the year approximately 26, I'm sorry, in the year 026. The Romans were in control of the land of Israel. We were less than 50 years away from the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans. Herod, I can't remember exactly when he died. I think he was still king of Israel at that time. And Romanized Judaism was or the Romans had great influence over the land of Israel. Roman culture had great influence over the land of Israel. So this is what was going on. And the Pharisees had already essentially almost completed their takeover of the nation of Israel. So 2,000 years ago was not a good time. It wasn't the time of David. It wasn't the time of Solomon. It wasn't the time of the First Temple. It was the time of Hellenized, Romanized, Babylonianized Judaism. But yet, whenever you speak to a Jew, they'll always say, our ancestors have been keeping these laws for 2,000 years. And yes, they are correct. And if you go back 2,000 years ago, you land right in the heart, slap dab in the middle of the Roman period. And so what these Jews are essentially saying is true. Yes, they have been keeping this Romanized, Hellenized, Babylonianized form of Judaism for 2,000 years, but not 3,000 years. They'll never go back further than that because they, in their hearts, know that there was a completely different form of Torah that was kept before the Hellenistic period, before essentially the Greeks took over in 332 BCE. And they want no part of that, even though that form of Torah, which lasted from, again, depends how you date the Exodus. So 1250 BCE is a common date that is given. Shabbat Shalom, Christian. And so from 1250 BCE, we'll say to around 250 BCE, give or take, so about 1,000 years, the form of Torah, if Israelites were keeping Torah at all, and many were not, they had gone over to idol worship and other false forms of worship, but the baseline, the form of Torah that if Israelites were to keep it would return to was always the written Torah, was always the Tanach version, if we want to call it that, was always the Karaite version, if you want to call it that, of Torah, never the rabbinical version. Okay, all right, enough said about all of that. Let's dig into some biblical archaeology, and to that, I'm going to share the screen, and let's talk about a very important archaeological find. Let me bring it up here. There we go. And we're going to talk about something called the King Hezekiah Bulla. If you hold on one second, please, I'm just going to turn on the light. So the importance of this, so what is a bulla? Okay. Well, it says right here, okay, a bulla is a piece of clay with an impression of a seal. Okay, so it's something that a seal was stamped into. So various officials had, and even non-officials had seals. They had these seals that were made out of various substances. And in order to, or their form of making a signature, as you can see even to this day, in certain cases, was to take this seal and impress it into a substance such as clay that would receive the impression of the seal, and that's what a bulla is. Okay, so as we see, it's a piece of clay with the impression of a seal. And the King Hezekiah bulla, we can see it right here. Let me open this up in a new tab so we can get a better view of it. So that's, there we go, right there. Okay, so we can see that this is a seal impression. That's what a bulla is. This is a seal impression. And what's so important about this particular seal impression? Well, let's read. First of all, it's pretty small, 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. So an inch, I always learned growing up, is the distance between the edge of the thumb and the first knuckle. So so here, let's see if I can get this on the screen. All right, so do it. There we go. So if you go from the edge of the thumb to the first knuckle, that's about an inch. That was how I always learned to measure an inch. So it's about half of that. So we're talking about a very, very small, seal, right? So what's so important about it? It was found in an archaeological excavation together with 33 other seals, figurines, and ceramics in an ancient refuge dump adjacent to. Oh, Shosha, what do you want, sweetie? You want to come in? Oh, my cat wants to come in. Let me let him in. Okay, Shosha. One second. Come, baby. Come on. Come. Behave yourself, though. You don't behave yourself, I'm throwing you right out of here. 1 second. 1 second. I'm a slave to these cats. Come, baby. Come. No. You can't do that. No, can't do that. No. You know you can't do that. No. Come, baby. 1 second. Come, Shush. Come, sit. Come, baby. Come over here. You don't behave yourself, I'm throwing you right out of here. Okay? What show? There we go. All right. So it was found in an archaeological excavation together with 33 other seals, figurines, and ceramics in an ancient refuse dump adjacent to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem by Israeli archaeologist Eilat Mazar. So she died just a couple of years ago. She was wonderful. I've mentioned her many times before in various videos that I've done. She excavated a lot in the city of David. She found a structure which she believes to be the Palace of David, which she calls a large stone structure. Her interpretation of that was that this was the Palace of King David, and she found another number of other very important archaeological finds in that area. So written in the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. What's the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet? This is the old form of Hebrew, not the usual form of Hebrew that you see when we look at something like this in the Hebrew. I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cold. So this is not Paleo-Hebrew. This is the square script, or the Assyrian script, or the Aramaic script. And this is not the same as the kind of script you'll see here, right? It looks very different. So these are the letters in Paleo-Hebrew. Paleo just meaning ancient or early Hebrew. Okay. It is part of a larger group of artifacts known as the Canaanite and Aramaic seal inscriptions. So the Bulla, excavated in 2009 to 2010, so only about 15 years ago, and released in 2015 by Dr. Eilat Mazar, was dated to the reign of Judean King Hezekiah. We've spoken a lot about King Hezekiah. There are various artifacts from his reign, very important artifacts that you can find in Jerusalem. I'll just name two of them. One is the Hezekiah tunnel inscription. So it speaks about how Hezekiah dug a tunnel to divert water into the city of Jerusalem during the attack of the Assyrians by King Sennacherib upon Judea and ultimately upon Jerusalem, which failed. This is spoken about in the second book of Kings, chapter 18, if I'm not mistaken, thereabouts. And then another thing called the Broad Wall. At any rate, it doesn't matter. I don't want to get too far off track. And bears an inscription in Paleo-Hebrew script. And so what does the inscription say? What are we looking at here in this Bulla? Okay, belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah. Okay. And a two-winged sun with wings turned downward, flanked by two Ankh symbols symbolizing life. Okay. And let's just see if we can look at this again. Whoops. It's kind of hard to make out the lettering there, but that is what it says. Okay. A two-winged sun. Okay, so this is the sun with two wings, flanked by two Ankh symbols symbolizing life. The building in which the Bulla was found had been an administrative or royal building that the Babylonians destroyed when they conquered Jerusalem in 586 BCE. According to Mazar, although seal impressions bearing King Hezekiah's name have already been known from the antiquities market since the middle of the 1990s, some with a winged scarab, dung beetle symbol, and others with a winged sun. This is the first time that a seal impression of an Israelite or Judean king has ever come to light in a scientific or archaeological excavation. So what she's saying there is extremely important. So there's an antiquities market. Things make their way onto the private antiquities market. They're usually stolen or looted from Israel or from other places, and then they're sold privately and make their way into collections. And so there's always a question about what was their origin, where did they come from? It's not done in a systematic and scientific way. So she's saying there were other seal impressions of King Hezekiah that were on the antiquities market, but this is the first time that a seal bearing the name of King Hezekiah had been excavated in a systematic scientific way, and that adds a lot of information. It adds information such as exactly where it was found, exactly what archaeological layer it belongs to, so it can be dated more accurately, and other things along those lines. So the Bull attests that Jerusalem in King Hezekiah's time had a highly developed administrative system. Commenting on the discovery, Krista Rolston of George Washington University said that the presence of Ankh, an Egyptian symbol on a seal, was not surprising, as Judah had formed an alliance with Egypt at various times in its history. This is even alluded to in the story of Hezekiah when Sennacherib so when Sennacherib is coming to attack Jerusalem, he sends one of his officials named Rav Shakeh to essentially taunt or to convince the Israelites. He yells out that the Israelites on the walls of Jerusalem defending the city in Hebrew. And one of the things he says is, to paraphrase, is, why are you relying on Egypt as your salvation? He calls Egypt a reed, a sharp reed that if you lean on it, or a broken reed that if you lean on it, it pierces through your hand rather than supports you, right? So it was understood, and I just read a very interesting article in another biblical archaeological magazine, that it was understood, or it was understood that Israel was siding at that time, or Hezekiah was siding with Egypt in an alliance. And so there's a lot of, that article also points out that there's a lot of Egyptian symbolism on some of the various impressions and some of these various bullai that speak about King Hezekiah. If we had more time, I'd go into the actual story. Maybe we should, very briefly. So it was found in the Ophel. The Ophel is part of the ancient The Ophel is part of the ancient city of Jerusalem. Situated immediately south of the Temple Mount. If you guys ever come to Israel and I show you around, then I'll show you exactly where the Ophel is. There's a lot of a ton of very fascinating artifacts or results of excavations there. The site of two Jewish temples in antiquity, considered to be the holy site in Judaism and the third holy site of Islam. Excavations at the site, a collaborative effort by the Israel Antiquities Authority and Hebrew University, had unearthed some of the earliest artifacts ever found in Jerusalem, dating back as far as the 12th and 11th centuries BCE. So here's the text. Okay, Hezekiah. One second. Hezekiah. Ben Achaz, Melech, that's Melech Yehuda. Okay, Hezekiah, to there. Melech, there's Melech, Yehuda. Okay. Anyway, so that is the King Hezekiah Bulla. And we understand now its importance, right? It's the first, I'll repeat it again. So it's the first, where do we see the exact statement? It doesn't matter. It was the first mention of a Judahite king ever found in an archaeological excavation. And that's what makes it so important, okay, from the time of Hezekiah. All right. Any questions, any comments? If not, then let's go on. I'm sorry. Now I see what's going on. So this is Hezekiah up to here, and this is his father, Achaz, and then it says Melech Yehuda. So Hezekiah doesn't say son of, it just directly says Ahaz. That was his father. Right, so the son of is in parentheses. Melech, the king of Yehuda. Let's see if you can see this on the seal itself. It's kind of hard to see. But that's what we have. Okay, so it's this seal right here. These are those two Egyptian symbols that we read about, the Ankh symbols. Okay, that's this one here and this one here. And that is the seal that we're talking about right here, this one right here. Okay. Okie dokie. So anything else we have to say about this? I don't think so. That pretty much says everything. Okay, any questions, any comments before we go on? Question, Israel being in Egypt over 400 years, do you think Israel absorbed a lot of customs and Egyptian philosophy? There are many secular scholars who would like to say yes, but I honestly don't think that's the case. I think that there is that Israel was ultimately shunned, right? In Egypt, they were turned into slaves, and they were separated out from the rest of Egypt. And I think that this essentially allowed them to keep their culture. They also had a strong tradition of who they were and who their God was, who their ancestors were. So I don't think so. No, that's my personal opinion. Even though a lot of secular scholars will try to point out that they did, and they'll bring lots of different examples, but I don't think those examples are really very convincing. Maybe we'll go into that one day. So my personal answer is no, not to a very large degree. Okay, so we're going to go now on to Zechariah. Let me close this out. And let's move on to the book of Zechariah. We're in chapter 11 already, which means we're coming towards the end of Zechariah. Let me just open up the various, excuse me, as I said, I have a bit of a cold. The various sources. So in Zechariah chapter 11, let's see if the Hebrew is working on this one today. Yep, it's got better, has it? Let's see. Maybe not. Nope. Wait. Nope. So we're gonna have to probably just go verse by verse like we did last time. I know they're still making fixes to their website, but we'll do the best we can. And let me open up this Robert Alter. Just take a minute or so. Let me try one more time to see if we can get the Hebrew going, the entire chapter, which I much prefer. Nope, not at this point, unfortunately. So just give me a second here to get everything set up. So there's Zechariah chapter 11. We'll go back here, we'll go verse by verse, no other choice. Time here. Page 4552. Just bear with me one second here. Okay, so we've got our Robert Alter going. We have our text in Hebrew. We have our text in English. As you know, what I like to do is just go back over the previous chapter in English, because Zechariah is kind of a very poetic and a little bit of a complicated book. So it would be good to just get the context again. So we'll read chapter 10. And this is what we studied last week. We studied Zechariah chapter 10 last week. So let's go back over Zechariah chapter 10. Okay, so ask Yahweh. By the way, whenever you see the word Lord or the Lord in English, that should be read as Yahweh. That's the way that most translations into English of the Tanakh translate the word Yud Hey, Wow Hey, the word Yahweh. So ask Yahweh for rain in the springtime. It is Yahweh who sends the thunderstorms. He gives showers of rain to all people and plants of the field to everyone. The idols speak deceitfully. Diviners see visions that lie. They tell dreams that are false. They give comfort in vain. Therefore, the people wander like sheep, oppressed for lack of a shepherd. My anger burns against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders, for Yahweh Almighty will care for his flock, the people of Judah, excuse me, and make them like a proud horse in battle. From Judah will come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, from him every ruler. Together they will be like warriors in battle, trampling their enemy into the muds of the street. They will fight because Yahweh is with them, and they will put the enemy horsemen to shame. I will strengthen Judah and save the tribes of Joseph. I will restore them because I have compassion on them. They will be as though I had not rejected them, for I am Yahweh their God, and I will answer them. The Ephraimites will become like warriors. Ephraimites were the northern kingdom, so we have prophecy, the restoration of the southern kingdom, Judah. Joseph represents the northern kingdom, especially Ephraim. That was the main tribe in the northern kingdom. The Ephraimites will become like warriors, and their hearts will be glad as with wine. Their children will see it and be joyful. Their hearts will rejoice in Yahweh. I will signal for them and gather them in. Surely I will redeem them. They will be as numerous as before. Though I scatter them among the peoples, yet in distant lands they will remember me. Then their children will survive, and they will return. I will bring them back from Egypt and gather them from Assyria. I will bring them to Gilad and Lebanon, and there will not be enough room for them. They will pass through the sea of trouble, and the surging sea will be subdued, and all the depths of the Nile will dry up. Assyria's pride will be brought down, and Egypt's scepter will pass away. I will strengthen them in Yahweh, and in his name they will live securely. Okay, so that's Zechariah chapter 10. Let's go on to Zechariah chapter 11. Now we're going to switch over to the Hebrew. Okay. And let me just see if we're all set up here. So we're going to read in the Hebrew. Let me try one more time to see if I can get the whole chapter up in Hebrew. I doubt it. We'll get lucky. There we go. Okay. We got a little bit lucky. So, Tach Levanon de la Terre. Tach Levanon de la Terre. Open, Lebanon, your gates or your doors. By the way, this word delet de la Terre means your doors. This is figuratively speaking, talking to Lebanon. This is the command form. Tach, open your doors, Lebanon. Lebanon, what is Lebanon? We know what Lebanon is. Even today, the country of Lebanon, that's more or less where ancient Lebanon, where the ancient area of Lebanon existed. And the word Lebanon, the name Lebanon comes from the word Lavan. Lavan means white. It's related to words such as, a lot of words, albino. So I'm going to get so far off track if I start doing this. But you can relate it to the Latin word for white, which I believe is albinus or something like that. And so we get a word like albino in English. We even get the word luna. Okay, so luna is like lavan, which means white. Anyway, I don't want to get off track. It's called the Lebanon because it's a very mountainous region, and there's snow covering those mountains in a large portion of the year. Just around now, so the tallest mountain in Israel is part of that Lebanese mountain range, the Lebanon Mountains. And just around now, maybe within the last week or two, the final snow has disappeared off the top of Mount Hermon. So really well into, what is it now? Yeah, maybe the beginning of May or something like that. I think until around the beginning of May, there was snow on Mount Hermon. So and it probably reappear maybe around November or something like that. So for about half the year, these mountaintops are covered in snow in Lebanon. Okay, so anyway, Lebanon de la Terre. So Lebanon, open your doors, open your gates. The word, I'm gonna get so sidetracked if I get into this, but the word for door, or let's say how they translate it here. It's open. They do translate as doors. Is related to the word delta, right? And we know the symbol in Greek lettering for delta is a triangle. We also know that that where a river comes towards its end, in many cases it spreads out into a delta because it's a triangle shape, and that is related. And the reason that and in Paleo Hebrew, remember we spoke about the Paleo Hebrew. The Paleo Hebrew is the ancient form of Hebrew that we saw on the Hezekiah Bulla. So the form for this is the way it appears in modern Hebrew for the duh. That's a dalid. The form in ancient Hebrew looks very similar to the Greek symbol for delta, that triangle. And that's because the door of a tent was, if you think about it, even to this day, if you have a tent, the door is going to look like a triangle, right? It opens up, like the two curtains open up and into a triangle, okay? Anyway, I digress. So, Delatecha tochal ish bi'arazecha, and consume fire among your cedars. So now we have a famous imagery. This is the cedars. Okay, Erez is cedar in English, and Lebanon is Lebanon. So you may have all heard of the cedar of Lebanon. If you look at the flag of Lebanon, you will see on the flag of the modern country of Lebanon a tree. That tree that you see is a cedar of Lebanon. That's a cedar of Lebanon. Erez Lebanon in Hebrew, and this is the famous cedar trees that come from that region, and you can see them to this day. There's some regions where you can still see original cedars of Lebanon. We spoke about how Hiram, the king of Tyre. So Tyre, or Tzur, was a city on the coast of Lebanon. To this day, there's a city called Tzur in that same area, and Hiram, who's aligned with David and then with Solomon, although that may have been a different Hiram, that may have been his son, sent cedar wood down to Jaffa, south of Tel Aviv, which was then brought up to Jerusalem to build, for Solomon to build his palace and to build the temple, the house of Yahweh, Beit Yahweh. So, okay, so we have many references in the Tanakh to the cedars of Lebanon, and this is one of them. Okay, so your cedars will be consumed by fire, or this is actually a command form. Consume fire among your cedars. Okay. Okay, the translator is open your doors, Lebanon, so that fire may devour your cedars. So we already see that this is going to be a prophecy against Lebanon. Okay. Let's see if we can get a little commentary. Oh, open, O Lebanon, your doors. There's double meaning here. These are the doors of the kingdom within which are the great stands of stands of cedar, and they are the gates of the city within which are buildings with sumptuous cedar wood paneling. So that's what Robert Alter has to say. Okay. So where were we? Hillel berosh ki nafal erez asher adirim shu dadu. Okay, so whale, they translated here as juniper. That's not a good translation. Brosh again is in English is cypress. That's the word I was looking for. Okay, so wail, O cypress, for the cedars fallen as majestic ones are ravaged. Again, let's look in the Hebrew. Okay, Hele brosh ki nafal erez asher adirim shudadu, because the great ones or the mighty ones were ravaged or destroyed. Okay, so what does that mean? I don't know. That's very poetic. So it's a command to the cypress trees to wail because the mighty cedars have fallen. So that would imply that the cypress trees are less majestic or less strong than the Erez, the cedars of Lebanon. Okay, let's see what Robert Alter may have to say about that. Absolutely nothing. So let's go on, try to figure out what is going on. Then we go here, Helilu Alone Bashan. I live in the Bashan. Ki Yarad Ya'ar Habatzir. So oops, where'd we go? So another command here, Helelu alone bashan, wail, you, alon is an oak, and Bashan is the Golan Heights. That's where I live right now. Okay, that's where I'm sitting right now, giving this talk. Okay, so wail, you oaks of the Golan Heights, the Bashan, Yirad Ya'ar Habatzur, or in the Kri, in what is read aloud, the Habatzir. So let's get a translation for that. So so both the NIV and Robert Alter translating that is dense forest. So wail, O Bashan oaks, for the dense forest is taken down. So we have here commands, right, to various types of trees or to places. Open is a command given to Lebanon, so that fire may consume your cedars. Wail is a command given to the cypress, for the cedar has fallen. Wail is a command given to the oaks of the Bashan, of the Golan Heights, because the dense forest is taken down. So we clearly have here, right? We clearly have here a message, a poetic message of destruction for the north, for the northern area of Israel extending into Lebanon. Okay, so let's see where Zechariah is going with all of that. Okay, so dense forest, Robert Alter says, though Batzir usually means vintage, a forest is not a vineyard, and hence in this instance, the word may reflect a verbal stem. That means fortified, or by implication, impenetrable, like the word Mitzar. So we did a video maybe a month ago or so about visiting Mitzar Nimrod, what's called Mitzar Nimrod, here in the Golan Heights, which is called the Nimrod Fortress. So he's saying that's related to that word. So, and he's right. Batzir usually means like he's calling it vintage. That literally means the picking of the grapes. Batzir is the grape harvest. And he's saying it doesn't make sense in this context, so he's interpreting it as fortified or impenetrable. The NIV translates it also as where? The dense forest. Okay, so, all right. Verse 3, going back to the Hebrew. There we go. Oops, too many windows open. So kol yilelat ha-ro'im ki shudada adaratam. Oops. Right. So the voice or the sound of the wailing of the shepherds, okay, the sound is called yilalat. This is onomatopoeic, so we could see that the word yilalat sounds like wailing, like a crying almost, right? Like wail, like it's a sound you would make when you're wailing. So the wailing of the shepherds, kishudada adaratam. So adaratam is being translated here as 3. Here in the NIV as their glory. Robert Alter translates it as, and maybe we have other translations open, we would also use that as well, their majesty, so their glory, their majesty. So Robert Alter translates it as hark the wailing of the shepherds. Hark the wailing of the shepherds, for the majesty is ravaged. Okay, and then we have this little symbol here at the bottom, this little wishbone symbol, that's called an etnach, that's kind of a semicolon. Okay, so kol she'agat kifirim kishudad gaon hayarden. So Oops. So the voice or the sound of the roaring of the kafir is usually translated as a young lion. Of the young lions, kishudag on hayarden, because the pride of the Jordan has been ravaged. Okay, so let's get an idea of maybe what that means. Okay, so Robert Alter translates it as "Hark, the roar of the lions, for Jordan's bends are ravaged." That's an interesting translation. Gaon does not mean bends. Gaon means, here they translate it as pride. But for whatever reason, Robert Alter is translating it as the bends. Let's see what he is thinking. So, right, in verse 3, shepherds and lions, as in many other lines of poetry, these are the leaders. In the case of the lions, perhaps military commanders. And that's all he has to say about that. So I'm not sure why he's translating it as bends, but that's not what it means. The Hebrew says the Ona Yarden, the pride of the Jordan. I guess he's trying to interpret what it means by the pride of the Jordan. What is the pride of the Jordan? I guess, I don't know, where its rushing waters are or where its bends are. I don't know why he's coming up with that particular translation. It doesn't really explain it. But at any rate, we're on to verse 4. So, Ko Amar Yahweh Elohai. So says Yahweh, my God. Ra'eh et on ha'harira. Let me just see a couple of different translations. Okay. So says Yahweh, my God, Ra'eh. It's another command. Shepherd the flock of its own Aharira. So I would translate this as shepherd the flock that is destined to die. Okay. NIV translates it as shepherd the flock marked for slaughter. Robert Alter as look after the sheep to be slaughtered. And I want to open up. I don't want to only be using Robert Alter. I think people get the wrong impression. I think Robert Alter is the be all and the end all. He's not. He's just accessible. So let's do. Oh, Everett Fox, not the entire Tanakh. It's just the 5 books of Moses, so we can't do it, unfortunately. So I'll have to stick with Robert Alter for now and some of the other translations. Okay. So shepherd the flock marked for slaughter. That's verse 4. The prophet continues the metaphor of the leader as a shepherd and the people as their flock. Here the flock is bought and sold and slaughtered with impunity. Okay. Verse 5. So verse 5. We'll break this down into subverses, into verselets, I like to call them, because it's a long verse. Asher konehem yahargun. Let's translate up into there. Which those that purchase them will put them to death, will slaughter them. Velo yeshamu, and will not be held guilty. Mochrehen Yomar Baruch Yahweh wa Ashir. And those who sell them shall say, blessed is Yahweh, because I've gotten wealthy. I've become wealthy from selling them. This is a pretty kind of very vivid imagery. And let's go on to the end of this. Lo yahmol alehem, and their shepherds shall have no mercy upon them. Okay, so let's read that again from the beginning. So we're talking about, let's go back to verse 4 for a second. So says Yahweh, my God, lead your flock to the slaughter. Shepherd your flock to the slaughter. Because, or as, their purchasers will slaughter them and will not be held guilty. And those who sell them will bless Yahweh. Literally, will say, "Blessed is Yahweh, because I become wealthy," and their shepherds will have no pity upon them. Wow, that's pretty strong imagery. Let's get a little translation. Their buyers slaughter them and go unpunished. Those who sell them say, "Praise Yahweh, I am rich." Their own shepherds do not spare them. So if this is prophecy about Israel, which it usually is when we're talking about a flock of sheep, then this is a pretty vivid and harsh prophecy as to what will happen with Israel, or what has happened with Israel, perhaps. We shall see as we go on in the chapter. So that's verse 5. No commentary there. Good enough. Let's just get another translation. Whose buyers will slaughter them and bear no guilt, and whose sellers will say, "Praise Yahweh, and I will get rich," and their shepherds show no pity for them. Right? כי לא אחמול עוד על יושבי הארץ נאום יהוה. Because I will no longer have any pity. I will no longer have pity upon the dwellers, the inhabitants of the land, declares Yahweh. Wahine anochi mamtzi et hadam ish biyad re'ehu ubiyad melko. Okay, let's translate up until there. Sorry. So, because, for behold, I will cause each person to be found, each man or among men, each person to be handed over to his fellow man and into the hand of his king. Okay. וכיתתו את הארץ ולא אציל מידם. And they will crush. Katit. Kat means to crush. So they'll crush the land. ולא אציל מידם. And I will not save them, or I'll not save from their hands. Okay, let's get a translation. For I will no longer show pity for the dwellers of the land, says Yahweh, and I am about to deliver every man into the hand of his fellow and into the hand of his king, and they shall grind up the land, and I will not save it from their hand. Okay, that's verse 6. Verse 7. ואראה את צאן ההרגה, לכן עניי הצאן, לכן עניי הצאן, and I will shepherd the flock that is destined to be slaughtered, even the least worthy, or the poorest among the flock. NIV translates this as, so I shepherded the flock marked for slaughter, particularly the oppressed of the flock. Robert Alter as, and I looked after the sheep to be slaughtered for the sheep traders, and it took me 2 staffs. Are we on the same verse? That doesn't make sense. That's afterwards. And I looked after the sheep to be slaughtered for the sheep traders. So he translates this as the sheep traders. Well, that's an interesting translation. Non-intuitive, but let's see what he's saying. And I think he explains why. The received text reads, Anye Hatzon, the poor of the sheep, but poverty seems an odd attribute for sheep. The Septuagint, which appears to have used a Hebrew text that had had Hatzaon for sheep traders is followed in this translation. So basically, he's saying that this was a mistake in the Hebrew text, and he's using the Greek translation of the original Hebrew to get his translation. That's why he's saying this, the sheep traders. Okay. So, why? אקח לי שני מקלות, לאחד קראתי נועם ולאחד קראתי חובלים. ואראה את השעון, and I will take for myself 2 staffs, meaning 2 sticks, like shepherding sticks. Or I've taken for myself 2 shepherding sticks. לאחד קראתי נועם, one I called Noam is Na'im is pleasant, so pleasantness. L'chad karati choblim, and the other I called bruising or bruises. And I shepherded the flock. Okay, let's get a little translation commentary. So I took me 2 stabs. One I called pleasantness, the other I called bruising, and I looked after the sheep. Okay, what does that mean? Bruising, the Hebrew choblim, reflects one of 2 homonymous verbal stems, one meaning to bruise and the other to bundle together. Some translations opt for the latter and render the name as unity, but there is a biblical notion of antithetical staffs, one for mercy and one for punishment, and the present translation assumes that this is reflected here. Okay, NIV translates it as favor and union. So without getting too much into detail, what Robert Alter is saying is that there are 2 homonymous verbal stems. He's saying there are 2 stems that sound the same, that have the same letters, and he's taking the meaning as the one that means bruising, and that's where he gets his translation for bruising. And there are other translations that also do the same. Okay, up to verse 8. So Zechariah chapter 11, verse 8. Let me just check in and see what's going on here. Shabbat Shalom, Texarkanas. Texicans are us. And that's my old friend, of course. I won't mention her name. So, right, we're in verse 8. One, had et shloshet ha'roim b'yerah echad, and I will destroy, or I will cause to, or I will eliminate. Let me translate it like that: the 3 shepherds in 1 month, in a single month. Okay. Robert Alter translates that as, but I got rid of the 3 shepherds in a single month. What titzad nafshi behem, and Robert Alter translates it as lost patience with them. Titzad nafshi literally means, I lost patience. Titzad from the word katzar, which means short. Nafshi means myself. So literally, myself got short. Like I got short-tempered with them. Maybe would be a better way to translate it. I got short-tempered with them. And the NIV translates it as, in 1 month I got rid of the 3 shepherds. The flock tested me, and I grew weary of them. That's how it translates it. V'ram nefsham b'halabi, and they also got disgusted with me. B'hala means like to get sick. In modern Hebrew, chila means nauseous. Okay. And here the NIV translates it as to a feeling of loathing. So I loathe them, maybe would be a good translation. And also they came to loathe me. Okay. Verse 9. Let's see if there's any commentary there. 3 shepherds, right. We have no idea. Who are these 3 shepherds? I don't know. We have no idea, but we'll find out. Okay. Okay, verse 9. وَأُمَرْ لَوْ إِرْأَيْ إِتْخَمْ. And I said, I will not shepherd you. مَيْتَ تَمُوت وَنِكْحَدَتْ تِكَحَد وَنِشَرَوت تُخَلْنَا إِشَا إِت بَصَار رِؤُفَّ. So I said, I will not shepherd you. This is Yahweh speaking, right? Let those who die, die, or those who are meant to die, die. Let those who are meant to be destroyed, be destroyed. And those that remain, will eat one another. So literally, each one will eat the flesh of her fellow sheep. Okay, and this is in the female. This is in the feminine form. Tochlana isha. Isha means female in this context. So each female will eat the flesh of her fellow female. And that's what we got. Okay. Translation here. And I said, I will not look after you. The sheep dying will die, and the missing will go missing, and those rescuing each will eat the other's flesh. Let's get a little commentary on that. It appears that the prophet is now speaking, not God. Each will eat each other's flesh. The metaphor of the flock now takes a fantastic and grisly turn. The herbivore sheep, reflecting the nature of the people they represent figuratively, turn into voracious carnivores, consuming each other's flesh. Okay, so now we're in verse 10. Let's up to verse 10. Verse 10. So, وَإِكَخْ את מקלי, את נועם, وَأَגْדַע אותו. So I will take my stick named Noam, named pleasantness, and I will break it. I will break it in half, we can translate it as. Okay? Let's see how Robert Alter translates that one. And I took my staff pleasantness and broke it apart. Hafer et brithi asher karati et kol ha'ramim. To nullify my covenant that I had cut with all of the nations, with all of the peoples. Okay, what is that talking about? My covenant that I had sealed with all the people. The reference is by no means transparent. So we've seen so far that, as usual, Zechariah is a very, very difficult book to understand. We've already seen a number of phrases, a number of references that we have no idea where they're coming from, what they might be referring to, such as the three shepherds, this covenant with all the peoples. We're not sure what it's speaking about here, right? So Zechariah is a notoriously difficult book to deal with. First, since it would be strange for Zechariah to have a covenant with all the peoples, he may have segued into speaking on behalf of God. Such slippage not being uncommon in biblical usage, but the content of the covenant is unclear. It might be a tacit agreement, not at all like God's covenant with Israel, that the peoples are not to destroy Israel. Pleasantness might then be linked with this covenant through its specific connotation, right? So a lot of maybe. We don't really know what this means. Verse 11. What to far bayomahu, what to do, ken anye hatzon shomrim oti hidavar Yahweh hu. And it will be annulled, this covenant that Yahweh has made with all of the peoples will be annulled on that day. And they will, and all of the, even the most poor, the most downtrodden of the flock shall know, even the most downtrodden of the flock that are looking after me, that are guarding me, will know that this is the word of Yahweh. Okay, NIV translates this as, it was revoked on the day, and so the oppressed of the flock who were watching me knew it was the word of Yahweh. Robert Alter translates it as, and on that very day it was annulled, and the sheep traders watching me knew that it was the word of Yahweh. So again, he's translating it as sheep traders. So he's saying, I think if I remember correctly, he said it's textual error, right? What was that again? Sheep traders. Right, and he had so right. He's basing it on the translation of the into the Greek in the Septuagint. Okay, verse 12. ואומר אליהם, אם טוב בעיניכם, הבו ספרי, ואם לא, חדלו. וישקלו את שכרי 30 כסף. So I said to them, if this is good in your eyes, bring me my payment. And if not, then don't, then stop. וישקלו את שכרי 30 שקל. And they counted out my payment of 30 silver weights, 30 pieces of silver. Okay. See what that means. And I said to them, if it is good in your eyes, give me my wages, and if not, don't. And they weighed out my wages, 30 silver shekels. If it's good in your eyes, that is, if you accept my breaking of the staff, even though as a shepherd I would need it. Give me my wages. And the metaphor of the flock, the prophet observing what is happening to the flock, is represented as someone hired by the sheep traders. Okay. All right, so here we have also more words which are not 100% clear, and we're going to get various translations. Remember, as I always say, if you look at different translations into the English, or if you look at various translations into the English and they're different, then it really means that nobody's 100% sure what the Hebrew is trying to say. And again, Zechariah is a very, very difficult, in many places, very difficult book to translate and to understand. So we'll give it our best shot here. Verse 13. Oops. Verse 13, ויאמר יחווה אלי, אשליחהו אל היוצר, עדר היקר אשר יקרתי מעליהם, ואקחה 30 כסף אשליך אותו בית יחווה אל היוצר. Okay, we're going to get a lot of different translations on this one, but let's give our best here. Okay, ויאמר יחווה אלי, so Yahweh said to me, אשליחהו אל היוצר. Cast it, throw it into the Yotzer. So Yotzer, we're going to get some different translations. Let's see how NIV translates it. Throw it to the potter. That makes sense. The Yotzer is the one who creates. Robert Alter is translating it as a potter's kiln. The Hebrew noun hayotzer is opaque. Many interpreters understand it as if it were ha'otzar, the treasury, but there is scant evidence for interchangeability between these two terms, despite a limited phonetic similarity, and the violent verb fling for putting something in the treasury would be surprising. Yotzer means potter, and perhaps here, though metonymy, I won't explain what that is now. We've spoken about that in other times. It's where a whole stands in for a part, or a part stands in for a whole. Though through metonymy, it refers to the potter's kiln where the weights of silver would be smelted. Okay, again, some speculation, but that's the way he's translating it. Okay, but literally it does say the the potter, the creator of pottery, or just the creator. So take it and throw it to the potter. Eder hayakar. And NIV translates that as a handsome price. Robert alters this majestic sum. Okay, so eder, this valuable, or this wealthy value, I would translate it as something like that. Asher yakarti me'alehem, that which I had become very valuable, or according to that which had become so valuable to them. And NIV translates it as which they valued me. Robert alter as I was worth to them. Again, this is very kind of poetic and difficult Hebrew. So I took 30 pieces or 30 shekels of silver and I threw them within the house of Yahweh. The house of Yahweh is the temple, always. The house of Yahweh, to the potter, or according to Robert Alter, to the potter's kiln. Verse 14, and I broke my second staff, the staff of unity, or as Robert Alter translates it as the staff of bruising, in order to abrogate, cancel the brotherhood between Judah, the southern kingdom, and Israel. This is very poetic stuff. All right, let's see what we can make out of that. Again, let's get a little translation. And I took the 30 silver shekels and flung them into the potter's kiln in the house of Yahweh. And I broke apart my second staff, bruising, to annul the brotherhood between the house of Judah and the house of Israel. To annul the brotherhood, this is still another anomalous detail in the enigmatic prophecy, because the northern kingdom of Israel ceased to exist 3 centuries before this prophet wrote. So the northern kingdom, actually right around the time of, excuse me, right before the time of Hezekiah, the Assyrians in around 720 BCE had basically conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. And Zechariah is writing, as it says here, 3 centuries later. Okay. Alrighty. Verse 15. Why yomer Yahweh Elai, and Yahweh said to me, Od kach lecha kli ro'eh e'uili. Once again, take for yourself the vessel of the foolish shepherd. Well, what the heck does that mean? Robert Alter translated as, and the Lord and Yahweh said to me, once again, take you the gear of a foolish shepherd. Okay, who knows what that means? Foolish shepherd, his foolishness is spelled out in the next verse. Okay, so we'll find out. Verse 16. So we can break down this verse. It's a long verse. I don't see the etnach in this verse. All right, so whatever. Because behold, I shall raise up a shepherd within the land. He will not look after those sheep that disappeared. The youth, or maybe the young ones, he will not look after. So it's speaking about, I guess, a shepherd boy. NIV translates it as, will not care for the lost or seek the young. So the NIV sees that as the young sheep, but Robert Alter sees that as the shepherd boy. Okay, but it doesn't make sense. I think it means the young sheep, but and he will not heal those that have been wounded, those that have been injured. Wahanitzav lo yikalkel. So he will not heal the injured, feed the healthy, or Robert Alter translates it as the immobile one, sustain. Okay, nitzav means to stand still. Wanitzava lo yikalkel. So yeah, that maybe means those who have become lame, he will not take care of. Ubesar ha'bri'ah yochal, and he will eat the flesh of the fat ones. Farsem yifarek, and he will. And he will rip off their hooves, or break off their hooves. And in the Hebrew, it is farsehem. Okay, so we see this in Leviticus chapter 11 when it speaks about animals with split hooves. Mifarse parsa. Okay, those who have the animals that have split hooves, same word here. So he will break apart their hooves or rip off their hooves. So he's not going to take. So Yahweh is going to appoint a shepherd that is not going to look after the flock, but it's actually going to destroy the flock. Okay. And let's see if we can get a little translation there. Mobile one. The Hebrew Hamitzvah is unclear. It would ordinarily mean one who is standing, hence the guess of this translation. And that's all he has to say about that. Okay. So verse 17, last verse. Hoi ro'i ha'elil. So woe to you, you useless shepherds, you worthless shepherds. Robert Alter translates it as useless, worthless. Zvi'atzon cherev an zira'o va'al en yimino. For those who abandon the flock, may there be a sword upon his arm and upon his right eye. Okay, the sword be over his arm and over his right eye. Zira'o yavosh tivash wa'en yamino kaho tikhe. May his arm completely wither away. Okay, literally dry up, but wither away. And we have repetition here. Yavosh tivash. Repetition means emphasis, so may it wither, may it really, really wither away. And may his right eye really become dim. Again, repetition. As we say, always repetition in the Tanakh means emphasis. Emphasis. And that's it. That's Zechariah chapter 11. Let's read it over in the English because, again, it's a very difficult text. So we'll go through all of chapter 11 in the English, and then we're going to head on over to Leviticus chapter 25. Let's see if there are any questions. Shabbat Shalom. Hebrews V, John V. John 3, verse 16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever, well, if that's what you want to believe, go ahead. I think you're going to get a little bit of opposition from the people here. Unfortunately, that's a stupid philosophy, I'm sorry to say. And it's almost like the rabbis who are so stuck in their rabbinical nonsense. So the Christians, you Christians, are also stuck in this nonsense of an idea, even the idea that Yahweh, who has no physical form and can take on no physical form, and nowhere in the entire Tanakh takes on any physical form, and all of the verses that seem to imply that it does take on a physical form are misunderstood or misinterpreted, come from a lack of knowledge of biblical Hebrew and a lack of knowledge of the way that the Tanakh expresses itself. This idea that God can take on the form of a human being is nonsense. It goes against everything that the Torah stands for, everything the Tanakh stands for. And then the idea that this human form, this God in human form, then dies and somehow saves the world by his own suffering is just even more nonsense. There's some Karaites who like to pander to the Christians. I can't. It's so stupid. It's sad. I hope you are able to make your way out of this crazy cult that you're part of. But you have the right to believe whatever you want, just as rabbinical Jews have to have the right to believe that their form of Judaism is correct. Anywho, you're welcome to stay for the study anyway. Maybe you'll learn something. Okay, so that's Zechariah chapter 11. Let's read it through in English very quickly. Open your doors, Lebanon, so that fire may devour your cedars. Wail, you translate here as juniper, but it really said cypress, for the cedar has fallen. Stately trees are ruined. Wail, oaks of Bashan. The Bashan is the Golan Heights. That's where I'm broadcasting from right now, and where I live. The dense forest has been cut down. Listen to the wail of the shepherds. Their rich pasture has been destroyed. Listen to the roar of the lions. The lush thicket of the Jordan is ruined. This is what Yahweh, my God, says. Shepherd the flock marked for slaughters. Their buyers slaughter them and go unpunished. Those who sell them say, praise Yahweh, I am rich. Their own shepherds do not spare them. For I will no longer have pity on the people of the land, declares Yahweh. I will give everyone into the hands of their neighbors and their king. They will devastate the land, and I will not rescue anyone from their hands. So I shepherded the flock marked for slaughter, particularly the oppressed of the flock. And then I took 2 staves and called one favor and the other union, or bruising, as Robert also translated it as. And I shepherded the flock. In 1 month, I got rid of the 3 shepherds. The flock detested me, and I grew weary of them and said, I will not be your shepherd. Let the dying die and the perishing perish. Let those who are left eat one another's flesh. Then I took my staff called favor and broke it, revoking the covenant I had made with all the nations. It was revoked on that day, and so the oppressed of the flock who were watching me knew it was the word of Yahweh. I told them, if you think it is best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. And Yahweh said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter at the house of Yahweh. Then I broke my second staff called union or bruising, breaking the family bond between Judah and Israel. Then Yahweh said to me, take again the equipment of a foolish shepherd, for I'm going to raise up a shepherd over the land who will not care for the lost or seek the young or heal the injured or feed the healthy, but will eat the meat of the choice sheep, tearing off their hooves. Woe to the worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May the sword strike his arm and his right eye. May his arm be completely withered, his right eye totally blinded. That is Zechariah chapter 11. Any questions, any comments? Any questions, any comments? No? Okay, then because it's getting late, I think we're going to dig right into Leviticus chapter 25. So just give me a second to set that all up. Okay, so we want to go to Leviticus. Let me close all of these down. Oops, I should have left that open actually. Stays open. This can now stay open. We can use, besides Robert Alter, we can use this Everett Fox translation. So just give me a second to get set up here. So we're going to Leviticus chapter 25. And if you guys have any questions or comments, just type them in the comment section there, or you guys can talk among yourselves. Leviticus 25. This will be open right now. Let's see if we can get the Hebrew open. Oops. Any luck? Yep, we got the whole chapter. And now we're going to go back beginning here. Leviticus chapter 25. Oops. Oops. Exodus, Leviticus chapter 25, 30, page 1030. Good. Let's get this Everett Fox open. Shut the landing pad there. Leviticus chapter 25. Okay, there we go. So let's review. We are, excuse me. We are going to start in verse 35, but let's just review a little bit. So we're not going to go all the way back, but let's start from here. I'm just going to read in English without commentary as much as possible. So in Leviticus chapter 25, we're in verse 25. If one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they've sold. If, however, there is no one to redeem it for them, but later on they prosper and acquire sufficient means to redeem it themselves, they are to determine the value for the years since they sold it and refund the balance to the one to whom they sold it. They can then go back to their own property. But if they do not acquire the means to repay, what was sold will remain in the possession of the buyer until the year of the Jubilee. It will return to the Jubilee, and they can then go back to their property. So we spoke about this last week and 2 weeks ago. This has to do with the inalienable right of every Israelite to own land, have a land inheritance, which can never be taken away from them. If they need to sell it off, there's really no such thing as selling land in ancient Israel. If you're an Israelite, with some exceptions we saw below, but in general, there's only the idea of leasing it until the next Jubilee year. And even if it's leased to somebody else, then the person whose land it is has the right of redemption at any time. In other words, if he doesn't need that money anymore, he could just walk up to the person that he leased it to and say, I'm taking it back, and refund that person the difference. Okay? So we spoke about that. Anyone who sells sells a house in a walled city retains the right of redemption a full year after its sale. During that time, the seller may redeem it. So we saw that in a walled city, it's a little bit different. In a walled city, that is not part of land inheritance per se. Those are areas that are set aside for cities, and ostensibly anybody can buy property within the city. It's not the same as the individual's land inheritance. So the laws are not the same, right? You have 1 year to redeem it. You got to sell your property within a walled city. You have a year to redeem it. If you didn't redeem it within a year, then you lose it permanently. It changes ownership. If it is not redeemed before a full year has passed, the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to the buyer and the buyer's descendants. It is not to be returned in the Jubilee. But houses in villages without walls around them and to be considered as belonging to the open country, they can be redeemed and they are to be returned in the Jubilee. So we're only talking about this exception in the walled cities. Walled cities are going to be larger, more crowded cities. So they don't have the same assessment as would open fields, as would land inheritance. Okay. And there's an exception to that exception, and that's the Levites. Because the Levites don't have any possession, or don't have a land inheritance, they only have 6 Levitical cities, later expanded to more. But the Levites always have the right to redeem their houses in the Levitical towns which they possess. That's their inheritance. The Levites do not have a land inheritance within Israel. All the other tribes have a land inheritance, but the Levites don't have a plot of land, a tract of land, which is their own. They just get cities. They get a couple of cities. They get 6 cities. And so that is their inheritance, is only these cities. So the property of the Levites is redeemable. That is a house sold in any town they hold and is to be returned in the Jubilee, because the houses in the town of the Levites are their property among the Israelites. That's all they have. That's their land inheritance. They don't get tracts of land. They get these Levitical cities, and so everyone is going to have, every Levite / Cohen one is a subset of the Levites, are going to have a house within these Levitical cities. So since that's all they got, then they don't have to, they can redeem their house at any time. It doesn't expire after 1 year as it would for anyone else selling land within a walled city. But the pasture land belonging to their towns must not be sold. It is their permanent possession. So we'll see when we get to the Levitical cities that there's pasture land that's allotted to them around each city. And that's really their only agricultural tracts of land. And so it can never be sold at all. Okay. If any of your fellow... Oh, that's where we're up to. We're in verse 35. So now we're going to switch over to the Hebrew. So we're in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 35. Okay. All right. So let me just see one thing here. Right. So verse 35. So now this is moving away from land inheritance and possessions of land or houses and moving to a more general statement of what happens when an Israelite becomes poor, okay? Loses means to support himself. So verse 35, so if your brother, that means your fellow Israelite, so ach literally means a blood relative, but an extended blood relative, kin, they usually often will translate that as kin. See, they translate it here. They translate as fellow Israelites. Okay. So if so yamuch, mach, the underlying root mach, literally means to go low. Okay. So and mata also means to go down. So if your fellow Israelite shall go low, and his hand shall go, and his hand, how would you even translate? Mati adoimach, his fate shall go down while he is among you, or in your midst, or among you. Right? So we have the language here of going low, here of going down, but it means lose the means to support himself. It means become impoverished. Okay? Yadoimach. So in your sight, in your vision, among you, right? In your midst. It's probably the way they're going to translate it. Let's see. Here's among you. Let's go to Everett Fox for change, so nobody thinks that I'm only. Again, as I always say, Robert Alter is good and accessible. That's why I go to him. But there are many other good accessible translations. It's just he's the most accessible. But let's do a little bit of Everett Fox. So 25:35. So now whether your brother sinks down in poverty and his hand falters beside you, so he translates that as beside you, and he translates it as your brother, right? Not as your fellow Israelite. Robert Alter translates it as, where'd we go? Again, 35. Your brother, right? Okay. At any rate, what with Hezekiah, then you shall strengthen him. You shall lift him up. You shall give him strength. Okay, from Hazak means strength or strong. Ger with Toshav, Hai Imach, just as you would for the Ger. The Ger, as we know, is the sojourner, the quote unquote convert, and the Toshav is the alien resident or the permanent resident. So without getting into a long discussion, the Ger, I always like to use the American analogy. So Ger is like a naturalized citizen, someone who's born in a different country and gains American citizenship. A Toshav is a green card holder. Okay, so we'll say a naturalized citizen and a green card holder. That's really what these words mean. Wahai imach, and he shall live among you. In other words, he shall live honorably among you. Right? So help them as you would a foreigner and stranger, so they can continue to live among you. Everett Fox gives it as, okay, then you shall strengthen him as though a sojourner or resident settler, and he's to live beside you. So we have an obligation to help the ger, right? Shall not oppress the ger. And by extension, the toshav, although ger and toshav in this case may mean essentially the same thing. Okay, she'll hold him as sojourning settler, right? So Robert Alter has mentioned this before, that he sees this as really ger toshav, sojourning settler, and he shall live under you. Okay, let's get a little of his interpretation there. So 35. Okay, his hand buckle under you. The verb here is more typically associated with the foot, or it is a sense of stumble, but because hand is a metonym for power, the idea is that the person has suffered something we would call economic collapse. He shall live under you, that is, he shall live under your authority or power, with the understanding that you shall take reasonable steps to allow him to subsist. Okay? Chayimach. So really it says with you or among you, but he's translating that as under you. Okay, I think it kind of makes sense. So al tikach me'ito neshech with tarbit ve'yareta me'elohecha. You shall not take from him. So neshech would be I guess interest, or neshech. I don't know, they're going to translate it in different ways, but it essentially means the same thing. Okay, advanced interest or accrued interest is the way Robert Alter translates it. So different types of interest. Essentially, whatever money you need to use to support him, he has to pay back, but he does not pay it back with interest. Okay, because you shall fear your God. Okay, and let your brother live with you or among you or under you. Okay, let's get a little bit of interpretation. So advanced interest or accrued interest, there's some uncertainty is the precise differentiation between these two kinds of interest. The former term neshech etymologically means a bite, and shoch is to bite. The latter marbit comes from the verb to multiply, right? So in other words, a certain percentage of whatever money you're lending him, or maybe even implies compound interest, to compound. Okay, but at any rate, it's referring to whatever money you need to now use to support him. He has to pay back, but he doesn't pay it back with any additions. So if you use $10,000, then he pays you back $10,000. Okay. If kasbacha lo titen lo beneshech, marbit lo titen ochlecha. So you shall not give him your money. Okay, you shall not provide him your money, with neshech, one type of interest. Again, we don't really know what the difference is, 100%. Marbit lo titen ochlecha. And you shall not give your food to him with compounding interest. Let's translate it as, okay? Maybe this is usury, because again, the underlying root is nashach, which means to bite. So maybe biting interest, and here compounding interest, right? Maybe this is usury, meaning a very high interest rate, and maybe this means compounding interest or something like that. Again, it's not clear. Okay. NIV translated as, you must not lend them money at interest, nor sell them food at a profit. Everett Fox, who's excellent, do not take from him biting interest or profit. That's good. I like it. He's very good, Everett Fox. So he often does this kind of thing where he'll somehow incorporate the underlying meaning of the Hebrew word. So biting interest or profit. Hold your God in awe so that your brother may live beside you. Okay. But I think we get the idea, right? If your brother runs out of money, then you support him You make sure he can get back on his feet. You help him support himself so he can get back on his feet, and you do not take advantage of that economic advantage of that situation. You don't take interest on the money, right? You don't lend in the money at a usurious interest rates or any interest rates for that matter. Verse 38, Ani Yahweh Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I'm Yahweh, your God, who took you, who has taken you out of the land of Egypt. To give you the land of Canaan, and to be for you, or to be for you as a God. So we saw this again. We've spoken a number of times about something called the Holiness Code, Leviticus 17 through 26, if I remember correctly, where you see these kinds of statements: I am Yahweh, I am holy, so you be holy, or just a reminder that quote unquote I am Yahweh, and often this full statement of who took you out of the land of Egypt, who brought you to the land of Israel. In other words, you better remember who's above you. Okay, I'm Yahweh. This is what I did for you. Don't take advantage of your underprivileged or your brother who has fallen on hard times, because I got my eye on you. I'm Yahweh and I have my eye on you. Okay? Alrighty. So let's go on to verse 39. Any questions about these verses here? Redemption of the poor, verses 35 through 38. If not, then let's go on to verse 39. This is an interesting set of laws. So it's the same phrase. If your brother goes down, or slips down. Okay. So if your brother goes down economically, in other words, falls on hard economic times while he's among you, in front of your face, for you to see, and is sold to you. So it's known that in ancient times, and still in this day, in one way or another, that if you run out of money, you may be sold as a slave. So that's the case that's being spoken about here. So a fellow Israelite, an Israelite, runs out of money, and either his creditor or maybe he himself, to raise money, he sells himself to you essentially as a slave, as a servant, not permanent, but as a servant. That's the situation that's being spoken about here. Okay. Any commentary? No. So lo te'avod bo avodat aved. You shall not work him like you would work a slave. Literally, you shall not work him like the work of a slave. You see repetition of the same root, avad, which means to work, and also means slave, right? Or worker, perhaps, a worker slave. So lo ta'avod bo avodat aved. This root is repeated 3 times almost in a row. So maybe a good way to translate this would be lo ta'avod bo. You shall not enslave him with the slave work of a slave. Maybe something like that, to kind of express the fact that the same root is being used 3 times in the Hebrew. In other words, you don't treat him like a slave. You treat him like a brother. Okay. So he should be like a sachir. A sachir is usually translated as a hired worker, something like that. Here they translate as hired servant. Everett Fox translates it as and Everett Fox is also very good. See how he also captures that repetition of the root in Hebrew, right? Again, in Hebrew, lo ta'avod bo avodat aved. Lo ta'avod bo avodat aved. This root is repeated 3 times, and Everett Fox picks up on that. You should not make him serve the servitude of a serf, right? He's very good with this kind of stuff. And so he translates it as hired hand, resident settler. Sachir toshav imach. So as a sachir and toshav, he shall be among you or with you. Right? We saw before that if your brother goes down low economically, then you should take care of him, and the money you need to take care of him, you don't ask him to pay back with any kind of interest, but rather you treat him as a ger or a toshav. So ger, we said, is equivalent of a naturalized citizen. Again, using the American analogy, someone who was born somewhere outside the United States and became an American citizen. A toshav is a green card holder. We see the same word here. That's our green card holder again. And what is a sachir? So it doesn't say ger v'toshav this time. It's a sachir v'toshav. A sachir, I always like to say, is a someone who's in the United States. Again, using the U.S. analogy, someone who's in the U.S. on a work visa, Okay. So maybe like a seasonal agricultural worker. Like they have the to this day workers who come from Mexico and they get a temporary work visa. They pick crops during the harvest season, and then they go back to Mexico. That's kind of what a sachir would be. Okay, so like a migrant worker, maybe we could say, or like is it a B2 visa? I don't know. A B1 visa, we'll call it a B2 visa holder and a green card holder. Okay, so you don't take advantage of them. Okay, imach. But notice that so here you treat them like a ger and a toshav. So ger is a higher level. That's a naturalized citizen. Toshav is a green card holder. Here it's a B2 visa holder, a work visa holder, and a green card holder. So these are kind of lower levels, right? One is overlap, but it's a lower level. And I think the reason for that is we're talking about, now he's serving you. He's serving you as a servant, as a serf, right? I think that was a good translation that Everett Fox made. He's serving you as a serf, so you treat him as a worker, right? As you would a hired worker, essentially. Okay. Ad Shnat Yovel Ya'avod imach. Until when? Until the Jubilee year, the year of the ram's horn. Remember, Yovel just means a ram's horn. When we translate as Jubilee, it's just being transliterated rather than translated. So it's the year of the ram's horn because we know that on the 10th day of the 7th month, as we saw above in this chapter, in Leviticus chapter 25, the ram's horn is blasted and freedom is declared throughout the land for all its inhabitants. The same phrase that's written on the Liberty Bell. That was Leviticus 25, I think 23. No. Where is it? חודש שביעי בעשור החודש ודאוויר שופר בחודש הקדש את שנת ה-50 שנת ירדס. קראתם Leviticus 23:10. קראתם דרוע בארץ לכל יושביה, and you should proclaim freedom throughout the land for all its inhabitants. That is the verse that's written on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. Okay, Leviticus chapter 25:10. So the Jubilee year Okay, so until this ram's horn year, that 50th year, which is declared in the 49th year, 7th day of the 10th day of the 7th month of the 49th year. So he shall work for you until the Jubilee year. So he's like treated in the same way like a like the land inheritance. The land inheritance returns to its owner in the Jubilee year, and anyone who has had the misfortune of going bankrupt and needs to act or sell himself as a slave, then he's set free in the Jubilee year. Okay. Verse 41, Uyatsa me'imach hu vanav imo. And in that Jubilee year, or when he leaves you, he and his children go with him. This is different, a little bit different from what we saw in Exodus chapter 21, which maybe we'll touch on, but that's what it says for now. And he returns to his family, maybe his family land, and he returns to the land inheritance of his fathers. Okay. Any comments? Let's get a little translation. So, like a resident hireling, he shall be under you till the Jubilee year. He shall work under you, and he shall be released from you, he and his children with him, and go back to his clan, and to his father's holdings he shall go back. Okay, verse 42. Ki evadai him asher hotzeti otam me'eretz Mitzrayim lo yimachru mimkeret aved. Because they are my servants, they are my slaves, they're my serfs. I love that translation. I'm going to use that from that one. Serf. They are my serfs, or they're my slaves. Who, meaning who I, Yahweh, took them out of the land of Egypt. Lo yimachru mimkeret aved. So they shall not be sold as you would sell a slave. Okay? In other words, you can't treat them, they're not your slaves because they're my slaves. Okay, I'm looking after them. And I, Yahweh, am a kind and merciful master, and I'm the one, they're my slaves because I took them out of the land of Egypt. So don't think you own them. You don't own them. I own them. I own all of you. All of Israel, you're all my slaves. So don't start treating each other like crap. Don't start treating each other like oppressed slaves because that guy is really my slave and you are my slave. So watch yourself, right? It's the same kind of warning we saw up above, right? Ani Yahweh. I am Yahweh, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt. Okay. I think Robert Alter had a comment on that, if I remember correctly. They are my slaves. The paradoxical consequence of the fact that the Israelites, as God's covenant people, have assumed the conditions of God's slaves is that they are prohibited from treating each other as slaves. The status outlined here with mandatory release in the Jubilee year is a kind of indentured servitude. In contrast, however, to the sabbatical laws in Exodus and Deuteronomy, manumission occurs only in the Jubilee, so that the maximum period of servitude is 49 years. Not 6. So we mentioned that, okay? The status outlined here with mandatory release in the Jubilee year is a kind of indentured servitude. In contrast, however, to the sabbatical laws in Exodus and Deuteronomy, manumission occurs only in the Jubilee, so the maximum period of servitude is 49 years, not 6. So what he's referring to is what I mentioned. Maybe we should just very briefly touch upon it. And that is in, I believe, Exodus 21, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just read the English, and we're not going to dwell on it, but I just want to show you these laws. So Hebrew servants, if you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he shall go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, that she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master, and my wife and my children do not want to go free, then his master shall take him before the judges. For God, he shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl, then he shall be a servant for life. So it seems to be a contrast, right? That here the Hebrew servant goes free in the 7th year, but in Leviticus 25, so here in Leviticus 25, he goes free in the 50th year. Okay. So how do we reconcile these two seemingly different laws? I would say the circumstances are different, and I don't want to go into the whole thing right now. But here it's talking about if someone becomes poor and sells themselves to you. Okay, it's a very specific circumstance. Here it's as if you purchased already. Okay, someone who's already a Hebrew servant. It's not the same circumstance. If we had more time, we go into it in more detail, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Okay. Alrighty. So where were we? Well, up to here for verse 43. So let's go down to 46. Okay, verse 43. Lo tirdeh bom befarech. Do not rule over him harshly. Befarech literally means with like back-breaking work. Farech lifarech means to paraf means to break into pieces. So they translate here as severity, but that's not a very good translation. So let's look at that for a second. That's poor translation too. So BDB translates it as harshness or severity. Will harshly. Right, so the Hebrew noun perech portrays labor, a rule that crushes, breaks, or tyrannizes. Just see something myself here. Oh, go through the whole thing right now. So basically, back-breaking work is what we're talking about. Okay, so don't rule over him with back-breaking work. This word here, rada, the underlying root is resh dayan, resh daled hey. Okay, which means kind of to rule over, subdue. We already see it in Genesis chapter 1. Let's go to that verse for a second. So speaking about the creation of man, okay. Well, Yomer, this is Genesis chapter 1, the very beginning of the Torah. Yomer Elohim na'aseh adam b'tzalmenu v'kidmutenu. And Elohim and God said, "Let us make man in our image and in our likeness. We redu b'darat hayam b'of hashamayim u'b'hema b'chol haaretz b'chol remes haromes al haaretz." And let him rule over. Why yirdu? I'll get back to this word in a second. That's the same word we just saw in Leviticus chapter 25. Let him rule over the fish of the sea, or that which swims in the sea creatures, the flying creatures in the heavens or in the sky, or the creatures that fly in the sky, and the animals that roam all of the on the land, and all of the creepy crawly things or slithering crawly things that slither on the land, and that would also include small mammals like rats and mice and stuff like that. So it's interesting the way that the Torah or biblical Hebrew breaks down animals. It doesn't break them down by species. It breaks them down by, shall we say, place and function. So dagat hayam would include not just fish. Dag is usually translated as fish, but it really means any sea creature that's swimming in the sea, This would also include things like whales and dolphins, okay? Anything that flies in the sky, which would include birds, but would also include bats, would also include insects, flying insects. Behema, v'chol haaretz. Let me say typo. B'chol haaretz, I'm not sure. Behema b'chol haaretz. So any large animals that roam the land. B'chol remes haromes al haaretz, and any small creatures that kind of slither or scurry across the land. So that would be insects, that would be small mammals, that would be reptiles, reptiles like snakes, turtles, and so on and so forth, frogs. Okay, but the point is that here we have Yirdu, the human beings. Okay, the man that's made is going to rule over all of these different types of animals. Yirdu, and that's exactly the same word that we see here in Leviticus 25:43. Lo tirdeh, Yirdu tirdeh. So you shall not rule over him with backbreaking work. Okay, this is if a person becomes poor and has to sell himself to you as a slave. But rather you should fear your God. Okay, always again in these quote unquote holiness codes from Leviticus 17 through 26, we see this phrase again and again. Okay, I am Yahweh, you shall fear me, or I am Yahweh, you shall fear me. I took you out of the land of Egypt. Be holy because I am holy. That's called the holiness codes. Constant reminder who's up above us, right? So the rabbinical Jews love to wear a kippah on their head. I never wear a kippah except when I go to a rabbinical gathering. Then I'll wear a kippah, out of just because that's what's expected. But I've heard people say, why don't you wear a kippah on your head? Because the idea is that you wear a kippah as a yarmulke, a little beanie on your head, because that's supposed to remind you that God is above you. And I always say, you think if I don't wear a kippah on my head, I'm going to forget that God exists. I'm going to forget that God is above me. And on the other hand, I've seen so many people who do wear kippahs on their head who it seems like they've forgotten a long time ago. There's not necessarily a correlation between someone who wears a kippah on their head and the way they treat other human beings. I've seen plenty of scumbag, religious people, and plenty of very beautiful religious people, and plenty of scumbag non-religious people, and plenty of very beautiful non-religious people. And it doesn't necessarily seem that there's on the roof. And my God, it doesn't necessarily always seem that there's so much of a correlation between whether you're officially religious and wearing a kippah on your head or not, and how you treat other people. And in fact, sadly, sometimes it's a negative correlation, because unfortunately rabbinical Judaism stresses ritualistic behaviors rather than moral behaviors. It's one of the diseases of rabbinical Judaism. Okay, verse 44. We'll go through 46, I believe. So if you're going to have any male or female slaves, okay, literally your male slave and your female slave, which shall be to you, which shall be yours, so from the nations that shall be around you, that shall be surrounding you, from them you shall purchase a male slave and a female slave. In other words, if you want an actual slave that is going to be your property essentially for life, even their children become your property, then you need to purchase slaves, and that was accepted in those days. You need to purchase them from the surrounding nations. But if your fellow brother becomes a slave, then you don't treat him like a slave. You treat him like your brother. He goes out, he gets his freedom in the Jubilee year. Okay, you don't sell him like you would a slave. You don't rule over him with backbreaking work. You treat him like your brother. And if you want a real slave, then you purchase it from the surrounding nations. You don't treat your own fellow Israelite like a slave. ורע מבנה התושבים הגרים עמכם מהם תקנו. וממשפחתם אשר עמכם, אשר הולידו בארצכם והיו לכם לאחוזה. And so not only from the surrounding nations, but also from the remaining, or those who live. Well, this could be interpreted in a number of different ways. וגם מבני התושבים הגרים עמכם, so really, this is speaking about also nations that are not Israelites that are in the land of Israel. So of course, there's a command to destroy all of the Canaanite nations, completely destroy them, but that A, takes time, and B, in the end, was not done, as we see in the book of Joshua. So it's so I believe here what the Torah is saying is that the nations that also, the foreign nations that live within the land of Canaan, you can also purchase them as slaves. Let's get a little translation. You're not to have dominion over them, over him with crushing labor. Rather, you're to hold your God in awe. Your servant, your maid that belong to you from the nations surrounding you, from them you may purchase serf and maid. Also from the sons of the residents who sojourn beside you, from them you may purchase slaves, or from their clans that are beside you, that they beget in your land, they shall become your holdings. So that can mean a number of different things. Let's get a couple of ideas here. And Robert Alter does not have a comment on that. So we could also make a claim, but I'm not going to go in that direction. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, achuzah means a permanent inheritance. It's the same word that's used for land inheritance. So just as your land inheritance is something that belongs to you permanently, if you're an Israelite, so if you purchase slaves from the surrounding nations or from the leftover nations within the land of Israel, Canaan, then that becomes your permanent possession. In other words, they don't leave they don't gain their freedom in the Jubilee year, or according to, as we saw, Exodus 21, in the Shabbat year, in the 7th year. Verse 46, and this is the last verse we're going to do today. What? Nachaltem otam livnechem acharechem lereshet achuzah le'olam bahem ta'avodu. Let's translate up until there. There we see once again the etnach. This is kind of a semicolon in the Tiberian markings of the text. And you shall make them as inheritances, or you shall cause them to be inheritances. There shall be an inheritance. Basically, you shall bequeath them to your children. I'll translate it really simple. You shall bequeath them to your children. After you. Okay? In other words, these slaves that you purchase from the surrounding nations or from the leftover nations in Canaan, not only are they your personal permanent possessions, property, essentially, but if you die, then they become the property of your children. Okay, they're like property that's passed from generation to generation as an inheritance. Okay, Lareshet achuzah le'olam. Okay, to inherit a permanent inheritance, or to inherit a permanent holding forever, without expiration. Okay, Lareshet achuzah le'olam bahem ta'avodu, and you may work them harshly, or you may treat them as slaves. But for your brothers, the other children of Israel, no person shall rule over his brother, his fellow Israelite, harshly, with backbreaking labor. Okay? So in other words, there's a clear distinction made between the way you treat your own fellow Israelite. He leaves, he gains his freedom in the Jubilee year. He's not treated harshly in any way, shape, or form. He's treated as you would a foreigner who comes to live among you, a quote unquote, a convert. But if you purchase slaves from the surrounding nations, from the surrounding nations, I just want to read this again to myself. This may actually be referring to the Gerim that live among Israel. I'm not sure. I'd have to go over this, but I'm not going to do it right now. But let's just say from the surrounding nations or the nations, the leftover people in Israel, then those you don't have to give any special privileges. It doesn't mean you're allowed to be cruel to them. There are other laws that we see regarding slaves in the Torah that prohibit cruelty to slaves, but you don't have to give them any special treatment. You don't have to treat them like you would your own brother. You treat them as you would a possession, a human possession, but nonetheless a possession. You can bequeath them to your children. You don't have to, give them any special privileges. You can give them backbreaking labor, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's what we see. We see here a distinct difference between the way that a slave that is an Israelite is treated and the way a slave that is a non-Israelite is treated. And although that may sound racist, it's really not. It's just normal and natural, right? You would treat your own family member, well, I don't know, not necessarily, but you should treat your own flesh and blood differently than you treat a stranger, right? If you even in this day and age, right, if your brother, your sister, your cousin ran out of money, you're gonna treat them differently than if, I don't know, someone you just saw walking down the street who you've never met before in your entire life ran out of money, right? It's going to be a different relationship. It's only natural. And that's what this is speaking about. So we're going to stop here. And then we have the rest of Leviticus 25. Then we have two more chapters in Leviticus, which are 26 and 27, which are more narrative. So the blessings and the curses, and we'll get to those. I should say it's really 26, and 27 is also a bit technical. But then we're done with Leviticus. So next week we should be able to finish Leviticus chapter 25. Then we have Leviticus 26, which is the blessings and the curses. And then we have one more chapter after that, and we're going to go on to the book of Numbers. We're going to go on to the book of Numbers. Okay? So before we end, any questions, any comments? In Genesis 18:12, what three men appeared unto Abraham? I don't know, three men. What is your point? I'm going to take 2 minutes to go over this. Are you trying to say that one of them was Jesus or something like that? No, one of them was not Jesus. Okay? And go very briefly. Genesis 18. I'm not sure what you're trying to say. I shouldn't put words in your mouth. So let's close this out. I'm not going to spend more than a minute or two on this. It's late here. I don't want to get going. So Genesis 18. Oops. Right? Okay, so we saw three men. And these were apparently angels. That's who they were. They were angels. I don't have any other answer for you besides that. Okay? All right. So that's the end of our study. Yeah, modern day employees, exactly QOR2, whoever you are. I'll just call you R2D2. It makes it easier. All right. Any questions before we end? If not, I hope you enjoyed the study. Just a quick pitch, as I always do, which is if you're not part of our announcements group, then our WhatsApp announcements group, then you should be. So look at the original message that was sent out for the study, and you'll see the announcements group. Tomorrow is the new moon observation for the third month. I'll be sending out a message about that. If you're not part of the Biblical Calendar Society WhatsApp group and you wish to join, then let me know. You can text me and I'll send you the link to that. And financial support is extremely important at this time. There's a lot going on here, as I mentioned at the beginning of my opening monologue, and we really could use your donations at this point in time. So I will give the link, the donations link. We have a lot of projects that we want to get moving. There we go. So copy down and photograph that link. I think I can even make a QR code. Let's try something fun. QR code. Title. Let's try this. Let's have a little fun. One second. Create. Okay. Show. All right. How do we make it bigger? So there's a QR code. Oh, I guess it's going to stay. Huh. Let's see what happens if I click on it. I don't know. Whatever. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So there's a QR code. Can I make it bigger? I guess not. Is there a way to make it bigger? Hold on a second. Hide. Decoration. Show name. Yes. Color. Use brand color. Whatever. We could do that. Oh, I see. You can put that little thing in the middle. Oh, that's cute. Save. Oh, we learn something new every day. Show. Okay, there we go. Cool. So you can scan that QR code. That is going to, let me just play around with it a bit more. Save, show. That looks a little better, and I can even make a new one. Join the WAC. Huh. How about that? Fun with computers. Let's try that again. So you can also join our community. There's a monthly fee, which, as I always point out, is about half the price of a cell phone plan in the United States. Oh, I see. You can only show one at a time. Okay, cool. So there's a QR code for donation. If you want to donate some money to us, then, and I'll put up the one for joining the community, which is a monthly fee. But yes, there's a lot going on, and there's so much that we want to and need to accomplish, and we can only do it in this real world with real money. That's the bottom line. So please consider donating to us. I promise you it will be used for a good cause. I do not have a Discord. That might be in the works. It's not a bad idea. Q0R2, if you would like to contact me privately, then maybe you can be the manager of the Discord group. It's something I've been thinking about for a while. So that's it. I thank you for joining me, for joining us here. And join the WAC. I can leave that up from now on. I'll do that. That's a good thing. So I thank you for joining us for this Torah study. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov, wherever you happen to be in the world. And we will see you again. With the help of Yahweh, we will see you again next week. As always, we'll go out with some music. Let's get rid of this. We'll go out with some music. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua.
שבחי ירושלים את אדוני, הללי אלוהי ציון. שבחי ירושלים את אדוני, הללי אלוהי ציון. כי חיזק בריחי שערייך, כי חיזק בריחי שערייך, ברך בנייך בקרבך, ברך בנייך בקרבך, ברך בנייך בקרבך. הללי הללי אלוהי ציון, הללי הללי אלוהי ציון. שבחי ירושלים את אדוני, הללי אלוהי ציון. שבחי ירושלים את אדוני, הללי אלוהי ציון. כי חיזק בריחי שערייך, כי חיזק בריחי שערייך, ברך בנייך בקרבך, ברך בנייך בקרבך, ברך בנייך בקרבך. הללי הללי אלוהי